Okay, picture this. You scam America out of hundreds of millions of dollars. You go to prison for it. And then, what happens next? You get a blockbuster Hollywood movie made about your life that turns you into a global icon. That sounds like a wild movie plot, right? Well, it's not. It's the very real story of Jordan Belfort.
So let's just dive right in. The big question we're tackling here is pretty simple, but also kind of mind-blowing. How did a guy who orchestrated one of the biggest frauds in Wall Street history manage to profit from his crimes not just once, but twice? It's a story that's as outrageous as it is, well, revealing about who we are.
First, let's just put a number on the table. $110 million. That's the amount the court ordered Jordan Belfort to pay back to the thousands, and I mean thousands, of victims he ripped off. A staggering sum meant to repay the lives he completely upended.
Now hold that first number in your head and compare it to this one, 22 months. For that massive $110 million fraud, he served just 22 months in a minimum security prison. Think about that, less than 2 years in jail. That incredible disconnect is where our story really begins.
See, to understand the wolf, you first have to understand the salesman. Because long before he ever saw a stock ticker, Jordan Belfort had this raw natural talent for selling, and an even bigger appetite for getting rich.
I mean, his path was anything but normal. Look at this. At just 16 years old, he's pulling in 20 grand selling Italian ices on a beach. He then gets into dental school, but on the very first day, the dean tells the class, if you're here to get rich, you're in the wrong profession. Belfort literally stood up and walked out right then and there. After that, a door-to-gourmet business he started went totally bankrupt. But that failure gave him a revelation. He realized the product didn't matter. It wasn't about the steaks or the ices. He could sell anything. His superpower was the sale itself.
And with that realization, he set his sights on the biggest prize he could think of, Wall Street. But he wasn't just going to play the game. No, he was going to build his own fraudulent machine from the ground up.
So what was the engine of this machine? Something called penny stocks. And you got to understand, these were not your respectable blue-chip investments. This was, as one person put it, pink sheet garbage. They were completely unregulated, incredibly high risk, and almost impossible for legit brokers to sell. But they came with a magic number, a 50% commission. For a salesman like Belfort, that was just an irresistible target.
So how did the scam actually play out? It was a classic pump-and-dump scheme. Here's how it worked. First, Belfort's firm, Stratton Oakmont, would buy up massive amounts of some totally worthless stock for next to nothing. Then came step 2, the pump. His army of salesmen would get on the phones and create this insane artificial hype. As all these unsuspecting investors poured their life savings in, the stock price would just soar. And then, at the absolute peak, the dump. Belfort and his partners would sell every single share they owned, making a fortune while the stock price collapsed, leaving everybody else with absolutely nothing.
And to get a feel for the kind of pressure they used, just listen to a bit of a typical pitch. It was all about creating this manufactured urgency. Something like, hello, Mr. Michael. Listen to me. This company is tiny now, yes? But it's sitting on a piece of technology that's going to disrupt the entire home entertainment industry. We're talking a 10x return minimum. So, do you want to be first, or do you want to read about it in Forbes a year from now saying, God, I wish I had listened? Pure manipulation. And make no mistake, this whole thing was a finely tuned operation. The name Stratton Oakmont sounds like it's been around for 100 years, right? In reality, it was a boiler room in a strip mall. Belfort didn't hire Wall Street analysts. He recruited bartenders, college dropouts, people who were hungry, who he called closers. He trained them all with his straight-line persuasion method, which was basically designed to just bulldoze any hesitation. And who did they target? They went after working-class investors, retirees, the very people that the rest of Wall Street totally ignored.
And all that money that came pouring in? It funded an empire of excess that is almost impossible to believe. But while the parties got wilder and the spending got more and more outrageous, there was this deep rot setting in right beneath the surface.
I mean, this timeline just shows you how quickly the whole thing exploded. Stratton Oakmont was founded in 1989. By 91, the fraudulent IPO machine was in full swing. By 1994, it was this powerhouse grabbing national attention. And then, by 1996, the empire that rose so unbelievably fast was already starting to crumble.
And life at the top was, well, completely insane. We're talking a super yacht named after his wife, a personal helicopter, Lamborghinis. There were strippers in the conference room meetings, rampant drug use, Quaaludes to calm down, cocaine to speed back up. The whole thing really peaked with this one incredible story. He insisted on sailing his yacht straight into a massive storm, totally ignoring his captain's warnings. The yacht sank, and he and his family had to be rescued by the Italian Navy.
It's the kind of lawless, unbelievable story that becomes a legend, the kind of story that, for some reason, people are drawn to.
But that kind of recklessness just couldn't last forever. While Belfort was living like some kind of rock star god, law enforcement was quietly piecing together the true scale of his criminal enterprise. The walls, they were closing in.
The first sign of real trouble came from the regulators. The SEC started flagging more and more suspicious filings connected to Stratton Oakmont's IPOs. The official paper trail was finally getting noticed.
And then the cracks started to show from the inside. You had disgruntled former employees, guys who were maybe burned on a bonus or just couldn't live with their conscience anymore, and they started talking. To journalists, to investigators, they were talking.
And that's when FBI Agent Gregory Coleman comes into the picture. He didn't just see a few red flags. He smelled blood in the water. The FBI officially opened a case, and Coleman just started quietly pulling records, tracking the money, and building his timeline.
And it all came crashing down in October of 1996. Federal agents raided the Stratton Oakmont offices. Phones were being ripped from desks, files seized. Someone even tried to flush documents down a toilet. It didn't matter. The FBI had everything they needed. The party was officially over.
But this is where the story takes its most unbelievable turn. Because facing decades in prison, Jordan Belfort did what he does best. He sold a new story. And this time, the product was himself.
You really have to look at the two Jordans side by side. On the one hand, you have the criminal, guilty of wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, and he was facing 30 years behind bars. So to save his own skin, he cooperated with the FBI. But then look at the other side. He serves just 22 months and comes out a best-selling author, the hero of a Hollywood blockbuster, and a global motivational speaker. He didn't just avoid justice, he completely rebranded it.
But while we're all watching the movie and laughing at the wild stories, it is so important to remember what was actually lost. The victims weren't just abstract numbers on a spreadsheet. They were real people. They were teachers who lost their entire retirement funds, veterans who invested their life savings, families who actually remortgaged their homes to invest. And the worst part, most of them never saw a single dime of that money again.
And what does Belfort himself think about all this? Well, this quote right here is just so telling. He once said, "I was guilty of being greedy, but so is everybody else." It's not an apology, is it? It's a rationalization. He's framing his extraordinary crimes as just a normal part of human nature.
And that leaves us with the final, pretty uncomfortable question. He didn't just get away with it. He sold his story of fraud and became a celebrity because of it. So why do we, as a culture, celebrate a man who scammed so many? Is it possible that deep down, a part of us doesn't want to see him punished because a part of us wants to be him? That's definitely something to think about.